A major artist pulls out of Coachella, some of the surprises are coming through already, and I react to artists that you say don't have a great album in their discography. All that and more coming up on the Pop Pod. I am Pop Sam Cam. Thank you for joining me. If you're watching in video, you can see that I'm out in the desert ready for Coachella. I'll be covering that over the next couple of weeks and I will be there on weekend one. So if you want to hear more of that, hit follow or subscribe if you're not already. And I would appreciate if you could head over and give this podcast a 5-star review if you're enjoying what you're hearing. Let's get into the headlines where Coachella is going to lead much of this week. As we head into the first weekend, Coachella always kind of sets the temperature for the year in festivals. And we already have a couple surprises coming through with the set lists that have dropped. The first being Ed Sheeran, who will now play a set on the second weekend. And Weezer have been added to the first weekend. Obviously, the Ed Sheeran one is quite big. He is a festival headliner in his own right, can easily sell out stadiums, but he is added to the Saturday of Coachella and will just be playing in the early afternoon on one of the random stages, which is sure to be a massive moment for the festival. It comes as we hear that FKA Twigs has had to pull out of it. She's been having ongoing visa issues with her US tour, and unfortunately it means that she is not going to be able to make it to Coachella in time for this year.
Let's pretend it's not the end of the world.
Let's head over to the charts where we had quite a few new releases on Friday, and now we have the numbers for how they did on their first day, including Miley Cyrus's End of the World, which is of course the lead single off her forthcoming album, Something Beautiful. It debuted at number 33 on the global Spotify charts with 2.6 million streams, and also debuted at number 26 on the US Spotify charts. This is pretty good, but it's not amazing given that Flowers was such a runaway success, one of the most streamed songs of all time. I would imagine they would have been expecting for a bit more of a splash for this one, but you have to remember that Flowers was a pretty slow burn in its first week and kept gaining and gaining until it was at the top of the global charts. So there's still hope for End of the World yet. Azizam by Ed Sheeran was the other big one that dropped on Friday. It came in at number 27 on the global Spotify charts with 2.85 million streams. This is okay as well. I mean, Ed is usually used to being right up the top, but it's often radio that leads the way for him. So I would imagine this will continue to gain over the next few days or few weeks. The Marias also had Back to Me, which debuted at number 159 on the global Spotify charts with almost 1.4 million streams. This is a great result. They have obviously had a big smash with No One Noticed. And so to now see them get to a point of notoriety where they're able to debut songs on the global Spotify charts immediately is very good. I loved that song. If you want to go back, I did a bop or flop on all the new music last Friday. That's in the previous episode before this one. Ariana Grande, Eternal Sunshine, Brighter Days Ahead, has debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200, or not debuted, I guess, because it's a deluxe. Essentially, Eternal Sunshine returns to the top of the charts. It looks for a little while like Playboi Carti's Music was going to beat her to the punch, but that's not the case. She's headed to number 1. It's also expected that Twilight Zone is going to debut within the top 20 of the Billboard Hot 100. Let's move into the main part of the podcast today, where I essentially asked you guys who is a great pop artist, one that you really like, who doesn't have a classic album to their name or hasn't really maxed out their potential yet in terms of the album format. And you've come back with plenty of names. I've nailed it down to the names that were given to me the most. Starting with Miley Cyrus, who of course has announced Something Beautiful, and I actually spoke about this a lot on a podcast a couple episodes back, which you can go and check out. I also don't think that Miley Cyrus has really achieved her classic album yet. I think the closest she got to it was with Plastic Hearts, but I don't think that had like the commercial success or like a classic single to really push it over the line. And with this one, from the singles that I've gotten so far, I'm feeling something really cohesive, something really ambitious. And I feel like this could be the one where she does give us her classic album. But I agree with you guys in saying that she hasn't quite got there nailing the format yet. She's a great singles artist, but I feel like you can kind of poke holes in each album that she's released so far. So I have to agree with that one. The next one is Tate McRae. This has been a massive talking point this year because a lot of people kind of feel that she hasn't really achieved her potential in terms of albums. She's obviously had some big singles in Greedy and now Sports Car that's doing really well off the most recent record, So Close to What. And I guess the problem is that it's never really felt like she's tapped into a sound that's uniquely her own. And when you struggle to do that, you struggle to kind of find your way in the album format because you need to deliver your own identity over a set of like 10 to 15 songs and really prove that you know your sound. And I do think that she has struggled with doing that. I think that like Think Later had this kind of dark pop vibe, but the singles were sort of a red herring in terms of like, I think her work with Ryan Tedder came later in the process when she locked onto X's and Greedy. And as a result, they sounded very different to the rest of the album. I wouldn't say that that is a classic album by any stretch. I think that she got a little bit more ambitious on So Close to What. I think the singles have been incredibly cohesive and have delivered an artist who's certainly carving out her identity now, but it's still very attached to artists that were around in the early 2000s. She's got a real Y2K aesthetic to her. I hear a lot of Nelly Furtado, particularly in her work. And because of that, I find it hard to be like, this is uniquely Tate and this feels like something totally different. And in order to feel like an artist has achieved a classic album, to me, you have to feel like they have found a sound that nobody else is doing right now and they are totally owning. And I don't 100% get that sense with So Close to What, even though I do think that some of the songs are very good. The next one is Jennifer Lopez. This is an interesting one because Jennifer Lopez really has been one of the great sort of singles artists of our time. And I don't think she's always been locked in on delivering that kind of sucker punch album. It's never really felt that way. She's never felt like sort of a Madonna or Janet Jackson to me in the way that she really, really tries to carve out this perfect album. I was going through her discography, and I am even now, and looking at all of her albums, and each of them like kind of have 2 or 3 big singles and then a couple great album tracks, but then nothing that you can really sink your teeth into apart from that. The album that I did come back to when I was thinking of a classic era, I suppose, is J-Lo, the album that she dropped in 2001. This one has a pretty incredible singles run. It has Love Don't Cost a Thing, I'm Real, Ain't It Funny, Walking on Sunshine, Play. The first 5 songs are excellent. But then as I'm going through it, it does kind of start to lose its way throughout it. And I think there was a massive trend in the early 2000s, particularly, of having a very singles heavy record and then a couple fillers so that you could get that physical CD out, sell it, make the money, move on, go to the next album, more killer singles. This one, I guess, is an enjoyable listen, but yeah, I certainly wouldn't say that it's essential to know every single track from J-Lo. And I just don't think, thinking about it, that she was really the kind of artist who was prioritizing making that kind of album. The next one's Ariana Grande. I'm so into you, I can barely breathe. This is actually one that I disagree with because everything that I've been talking about is defining your aesthetic, doing something different that nobody else is doing at the time, finding something really singular as an artist, and maintaining that over 10 to 15 songs. And I think personally that she did that on Sweetener. She came through with this very unique perspective. She'd been through some incredibly tough stuff, and she found a way to flip that in a way that people didn't expect. And instead of coming through with this really depressing album, she came through with this one that worked through anxiety in a way that taught kind of mindfulness and also finding a positive perspective on things. And it's something that she launched with the lead single No Tears Left to Cry, which I think is incredibly produced, an incredibly unique pop song. And then she found it through the empowerment of God is a Woman. And then she had Breathin', which of course worked through her anxieties. And then that incredible closer, Get Well Soon, which just taps into her mind completely, into her psyche. She's got Pharrell working on some of it. She's got Max Martin working on the others. And it blends together to make this beautiful atmosphere. And I just think, to me, Sweetener is her classic. And even as I've been thinking about it more and more, particularly with the deluxe, Eternal Sunshine really achieves quite a cohesive, unique sound as well. And then there's Thank You Next, which is obviously the commercial blockbuster, which I think really got very personal and very vulnerable at a point in her career where she was at the top of her game and did something very bold. And I'm personally open to taking arguments that Sweetener, Thank You Next, or Eternal Sunshine are all classics. So I don't think that she is an artist that fits into this category. Taylor Swift up next. This is one that will obviously cause a lot of debate.
It's me. Hi, I'm the problem, it's me.
Because to many people, Taylor Swift has several classic albums, and you know what? I tend to agree, and they all fit in different boxes. I think that 1989 is the pop classic. It has incredible singles. It maintains a very cohesive sound across the whole thing in terms of going into that 80s sound, working really closely with Max Martin, and just really achieving something quite unique for the time. And I think it's also when she really stood out to me as a really smart, charismatic, funny songwriter who was able to flip public opinion on her and turn it into some very biting lyricism on a song like Blank Space. And she was also able to reinvent herself. Reinvention is at the core of any incredible pop star, and she proved it heavy on 1989. But I guess then the other one I go to is Folklore, which is also a reinvention for her, goes into this folk sound, taps into a new level of songwriting for her. She says that it was fictional. I disagree. I think there's a lot of personal stuff that comes through on Folklore. Maintains an incredibly singular sound for the whole thing. Finds a new producer in Aaron Dessner. They work together very tightly and have something super special. I think that Folklore is very close to a classic as well. I guess there's other albums by her that I really like that I just think falter at a few moments, Speak Now being one of them. I think that Red is a classic to me. It's probably my favorite album by her, but I don't think that it maintains a sound for the whole thing. It's kind of still skipping between country and pop sounds, even though it has some incredible songs like All Too Well, Holy Ground, Treacherous, just to name a few. But I think if we're really going to talk about the albums that are tight, cohesive packages that just make sense and showcase Taylor Swift at the top of her game, it's 1989 and it's Folklore. Next, Katy Perry.
You make me feel like I'm living a teenage dream.
Another very divisive one. I can quite comfortably say that the only album that fits into this conversation is Teenage Dream. Teenage Dream is a classic pop era by any measurement. She literally had 6 number ones, I think it is. The singles run is legendary. Some of the greatest pop songs of that time, including Teenage Dream, which I think is perfect in every way. I went back to this album recently and listened to it because I actually think it was for something for this podcast, and I really enjoyed the singles, but then you just get to moments where this album just really slips up towards the back end. I'm not a fan of songs like Circle the Drain. I think that Peacock is kind of a little bit on the nose. It just doesn't maintain the flair that the singles have. And I think because of that, it's kind of remembered more for the era and more for what it achieved in terms of the music video, the performances, everything, rather than it being a kind of album that you can hit from start to finish and really love. Like Pearl, Who Am I Living For? Totally forgettable. Not Like the Movies doesn't do anything for me. So I think I have to agree in saying that she doesn't have a perfect album, even though Teenage Dream is a classic era. Camila Cabello, moving on to this is one, obviously, that a lot of people will have thoughts about as well. And she is an artist that I actually feel has come close on a couple of occasions, but doesn't really get her credit for that. I think that her debut was incredibly strong for a debut, tried out a couple of things, had a massive single in Havana. Never Be the Same was also big. I think that it established her as a really exciting pop star. Romance, I think, is very bold and ambitious, but I don't think it totally achieves what it was trying to get across, and it very much got lost in terms of not really having a huge single apart from Senorita, which was massive but is totally a red herring to what the rest of the album gives. Then I think this is where things start to get quite exciting for her. Familiar taps into her heritage, goes very heavy on the Latin music vibes, but also does some really interesting things sonically in terms of like Psycho Freak with Willow, sorry, not Lizzo. Don't Go Yet is one of her most colorful, vibrant singles. Bam Bam does the impossible job of making an Ed Sheeran feature sound incredibly exciting, but it still does kind of jump over a bit, even though it does have a pretty cohesive theme. But I really like Familiar. I think it's a good album. I don't think it's a classic. Then we get to see XOXO, which I think that some people will argue is a classic, does something very different for her in terms of kind of moving into a hyperpop space a little bit, but more so, I would say, going to the sounds of Miami in terms of there's reggaeton, hip hop, there's a little bit of EDM injected into this. I think that she treats the features very cleverly on this album as well. And it also has some of her most personal songwriting in terms of songs like Boat and also 20 somethings. I appreciate what she's trying to do on this album, and I think that it almost gets there, but for me it's just disrupted so much by the interludes and the fact that she gives so much time to the features instead of making it uniquely about herself on this album that seems to be quite personal to her. So I appreciate it, and I think to me it reminded me that Camila Cabello can be a very exciting artist, but the stars have not totally aligned for her on an album yet. Ellie Goulding next. I'm trying to think about this one because I do think that Ellie is someone who's been incredibly successful at having great singles on the album, and even some songs, some like deep cuts that are very good. I'm thinking of an album like Delirium that has some incredibly strong pop songs that were never made singles, like Around You and Codes and even Holding On For Life. To me, it's a very enjoyable album to listen to, but I don't think it does something incredibly cohesive throughout the whole thing. And I think it's a little bit long for me to totally like lock into it. For her classic album, if I had to name one, I would have to say Halcyon. I think that that's the one that has the most individual Ellie Goulding sound. I like how the production is quite trippy and also like a little bit distorted at points as well. I think that her voice really shines through on it. It has incredible singles like Anything Can Happen, and then of course Burn, which is added to the deluxe edition of it. I just don't know if I'm excited enough by it from start to finish for me to like label it with a stone cold classic, but I do think it is a great album, and I think that Ellie has had some incredibly successful eras. But yeah, I think that she could really like lock into a 10-track album where she sticks to this really distorted electronic pop sound and comes through with something really singular. She hasn't quite been able to do that yet. The final one is Harry Styles.
In this world, it's just us. You know it's not the same as it was.
Harry, I think many people would argue that he does have a classic era. Harry's House won the Grammy for Album of the Year, has some huge songs off it, and has a pretty strong aesthetic to it as well. For me, Harry's House just kind of got a little bit dull in the back half of the record, and some of the songwriting I think gets a little bit vague at points as well. So I don't know if that's one that I would say is a classic. Fine Line is probably the one that I would go to because I thought that the visuals for it were just so vibrant and really captured what's exciting about Harry Styles, which is this like incredible stage presence that he delivers. I thought that the singles were his most likable. Lights On, I love that kind of like psychedelic pop space for him. And then I thought that some of the deep cuts were super cool as well. Fine Line, the title track, is a beautiful song. Then I think Canyon Moon is really cool. It's like in a Fleetwood Mac kind of vibe. Cherry and Falling, some of his best ballads. I could make an argument for this being a pretty classic album to me, and it's because it's got a strong aesthetic. He's really at the center of it. It feels very individual to Harry. It has great singles, but it has great deep cuts as well. This could go down as a classic for me, even though people will argue to Harry's House. This one's the way more interesting one. They're the artists that I've got. If you've got any more, maybe we can do another one of these. You can find me in my DMs, or you can comment on this podcast if you want me to do any more artists in this series. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining me. It's going to be a big week. There is plenty coming up. I've got interviews with some iconic songwriters. I'm going to have lots of interviews at Coachella next week. It's an exciting time for the podcast. Hit follow or subscribe if you're enjoying it. Just some quick news, which is with everything going on this week, there's going to be 3 episodes coming out. 1 today, 1 on Wednesday, and 1 on Friday. It's going to be lots of fun though. See you on Wednesday.